Hey everyone, my name is Peter with Afficionado Coffee Roasters, and I'm here to go over some fundamentals so that you can make the best pour over. Before we get started with our pour over, we're just going to take some time to break down each element of a pour over. First element, and the most simple, is water. So water you can break down into a couple modalities. The first is how much. So we'll talk about ratio in a second, but ratio is important, very important. But the first thing I want to go over is temperature. Temperature is very important to coffee. Typically with high temperatures, you're going to want to go with a lighter roast coffee. And when you have a coffee that's more developed, you're going to want to ease back on the temperature. It's going to allow you to get more sweetness, more balance, and a smoother extraction with the darker roast coffees. Contrast that with lighter roast coffees. You kind of want to bump up the temperature from 202 to about 205. At those temperatures, with the lighter roast coffees that have more nuance, they're more articulate, some fruity notes, maybe they have a brightness of acidity that you want to accentuate. The higher temperature is going to allow you to access those qualities of the coffee. Again, switching back to a more developed, more nostalgic coffee, a blend, something that is toasty and chocolatey and nutty. Those types of flavors don't require a super high temperature. They're much better at around 200 to 198, I would say. Keep in mind with pour overs also, you're going to start out with the temperature that you have. And as the pour over progresses, the temperature of the water is going to dip down and continue to get lower and lower as the pour over finishes. Now, that's actually really good because as the coffee is extracting and you're pulling more extractable material out of the coffee, the temperature of the water is going to go down, which is going to provide less and less extraction as the pour over continues. So we talked about ratio, we talked about temperature. Now let's talk about water application. The only other variance with water would be application. So that is how much agitation it creates or how little agitation it creates. So typically with our extraction methods, we like to teach more of a very gentle application of the water. The water should never toss and rotate the coffee. That's called cavitation. We want to limit cavitation with the extraction as much as possible. That's going to ensure that we don't stir up a lot of those bitter compounds that can be extracted from the coffee with a lot of movement. Those are tannins. They're bitter compounds that actually reside in the coffee, and we're going to try our best not to cavitate the coffee and stir those up. So that has to do with very smooth, gentle application of the water, very deliberate application of the water. It requires a lot of practice with these kettles. It's not a skill set you can develop overnight. The skill set takes place and develops over many, many repetitions of pour over. These gooseneck kettles, they help with distributing and allowing the water to eject out of the kettle in what's known as laminar flow. So laminar flow is creating a stream of water that is free of turbulence. It's going to allow us to extract the coffee without too much disturbance of the coffee bed. The other thing is distance, right? We're not going to want to pour the pour over from super high. We're gonna actually focus on about 2 to 3 inches above the coffee bed at all times. All right, so let's go over the hardware we're gonna need to execute this pour over. First, obviously we have our water kettle. You could really use any water kettle as long as it has a gooseneck. That really helps to create that laminar flow I was talking about. Next, obviously we have our coffee, the star of the show. And our pour over device we're using today is V60 Hario. Really, really good glass manufacturer. Hario's out of Japan. They've been in business for a very long time. They make really, really nice glass for the pour over. It helps create really, really crystal clean and really magnify the notes of the coffee. They work spectacularly. We have a Hario number 2 filter. This is the natural, the non-bleached. There's a lot of schools of thought with the natural or non-bleached. I don't really have a preference, but here today we have the natural. Also have a coffee cup. And if you're gonna be brewing in a colder atmosphere, you're gonna want the lid to keep the coffee fresh for about 10-15 minutes after you brew the coffee. The next detail we're gonna talk about in your pour over is the coffee grinds. So we're using Cruz Grande, which is a really, really nice coffee out of Huehuetenango in Guatemala. It's a washed coffee, perfect for pour over, okay? It has some really nice acidity and nuance to it that we're gonna extract today with this pour over technique. But while we're talking about the coffee, let's talk about grind. Grind is extremely important for these pour overs because it has to directly correlate with flow rate. It's really important that the flow rate is consistent and it has some speed to it. What typically happens if you've ever been making a pour over and the water sort of stalls out of the bottom into the carafe and you have a lot of water up top, there's a lot of pooling, a lot of water up top and not much extraction coming through the bottom. That's because the grind is very fine. That's actually suboptimal. You really want to focus on having your granularity of your coffee around 900 micron. We can detail that on screen. But you want a nice coarse grind that's going to allow the water to flow through the coffee without any resistance. That's extremely important. The next thing that's important about the coffee itself is the dose. So now I will talk about our ratio. If you're making coffee for 2 people, we're going to shoot for 35 grams of coffee in the Hario, and we're going to be making 5 installments of water at 35 grams. And then we're going to use a bypass technique where we're actually going to be adding fresh water that we're not going to be putting through the coffee. That's a technique that we've really started enjoying several years ago, and we still use that technique today. It's a bypass method. Okay, so there's a lot of discussion on this topic. Do you rinse the filter? Do you not rinse the filter? I'm a little bit agnostic towards the subject. Sometimes I rinse the filter, sometimes I don't. But for purposes of today, we're going to go ahead and rinse it. This is also a good time to actually preheat the system. That's one really positive benefit to rinsing your filter. It helps preheat all the glass elements inside this whole system. So it's going to give you a really, really even temperature control with the extraction. So there are some positive attributes to it. Okay, once the filter is rinsed and our system is preheated, we're going to go ahead and we're going to add 35 grams of coffee to the cone. .900 microns is the perfect grind size for this coffee for this pour over. We're going to go ahead and flatten out the coffee bed. We're going to go ahead and tear out our scale. And we're going to start the blooming phase, okay? The first addition of water. This is crucial. The water is going to contact the coffee and it's going to start releasing trapped carbon dioxide. It's also going to roughly absorb twice its rate in water and prepare itself for the extraction. So you really want to focus on a very light pour and a complete saturation of the granular bed so it can achieve the bloom and its preparation of extraction. So we'll go ahead and start our timer. Just want to go ahead and float the water. Touch up in the areas that you need. So 35 grams of water went into the granular bed. Now we're going to let the water be absorbed by the coffee and release the carbon dioxide that was developed in the roasting process. It's interesting to note that during the degassing process, the true extraction of coffee will not proceed until the degassing is complete. It's around 45 seconds. We're going to go ahead and add our second installment of water. We're going to bring it to 70 grams. As you can see, we have a very nice effective extraction going on here. There's no water cooling on the top. The water is allowed to sift and sort of migrate through the coffee bed without any restriction. Okay, once all the water has passed through the granular bed, we're going to go ahead and end our third installment. Bring it to 105. Here's our fourth installment. I'm going to go to 140. You'll notice that we're waiting for the water to pass through the bed completely before we start the next addition. This is to ensure that we have an effective extraction going on. And our final. We're just at 2 minutes and 45 seconds now, which is very good. You want to complete the extraction phase of this coffee in 3 minutes or less. That's very important. Anything over 3 minutes, you start to pull out some bitter compounds. We prefer that you terminate the extraction in 3 minutes. Now, this is a good time to go ahead and swirl the coffee and ensure it's homogeneous. You really want to take a second to appreciate this coffee, or any coffee that you're brewing with this pour-over method, because in this concentrated form, a lot of the flavor compounds and a lot of the nuances of the coffee really are presenting themselves in this state. Okay, so now that we've completed the extraction phase, we're going to add 105 grams of water as a bypass. And I know this looks a little unorthodox, but this is the dilution phase. We have a concentrate in the carafe, and we're diluting it to strength to enjoy. This is the fun part with the dilution. We have a benchmark of 3 parts to the dilution, which I said is 105 grams on 35 grams in. But you could custom tailor that. You could make it a little bit stronger by adding less water, or you could make it a little bit more, adding a little bit more dilution on lighter roast coffees, like something like a Ethiopian natural, something with a lot of high acidity typically likes to be diluted just a touch more. Alright, and next, I like to preheat my cup. I think that's a really important part of this. So we'll go ahead and pour over whatever is left in the kettle to preheat the cup. And then serve the coffee. As you can see, you have enough yield to fill an 8-ounce cup plus some extra. Yeah, that's really exceptional. So just some tasting notes on the coffee. A lot of rum, sugary rum type flavors, really, really complex acidity that we accentuated with the Hario and pour-over brewing. And just really, really deep honey, vanilla, a lot of flavors of origin in there. Really exceptional coffee. So as you can see, applying the right techniques with these pour-overs is going to allow you to extract the maximum amount of the coffee. It's going to allow you to extract all those wonderful flavors when executed properly. So hopefully with these tips, you can make your own pour over. Best it's ever been.